The next session we have this afternoon is one that I am just absolutely delighted and so pleased to have the opportunity to bring forward this gentleman. As he and I talked a couple of days ago, even though we had not physically met, it seemed like we both knew each other from a number of discussions and communications over a period of time. So I'm just terribly delighted to have Kevin as our keynote speaker this afternoon. Kevin is president of Hancock Lumber Company that's located up in Casco, Maine. And it's a relatively new company. It's only been around since 1848. And Kevin is the sixth generation of his family to preside over and lead the business. Kevin's journey is absolutely fascinating to me. He learned he had Spasmodic Dysphonia maybe 7 years ago or so. And then he started this journey and decided to make a trip to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation out in South Dakota. So obviously Kevin is going to walk us through his journey, and he can certainly bring it to us much better than I can kind of throw out some overtones. So Kevin, I'm turning it over to you.
I gotta start by giving you a quick example of what an ordinary person I am. So, I've never been to Nashville. First time. And my wife was not able to go. It's a place we've always wanted to go together. And we will, but we were talking about, what will you do first time? Will you go to the Grand Ole Opry? Will you go to the Johnny Cash Museum? And I said, well, that all sounds great. I'm not sure. But there's one thing I know I'm going to do while I'm in Nashville. I'm going to have breakfast at the Waffle House. Which I did this morning, and it was unreal. We don't have Waffle House in Maine, and it's like my favorite place for breakfast. I want to read you something right out of the gate. I have a dear friend who knows about my SD, and her daughters are in middle school, and they were reading the famous children's book by E.B. White, The Trumpet of the Swan. And she got reading it. She gave me a copy, and when I read it, I remembered why. I just want to read you this one passage. So this is the story of Lewis, the baby trumpeter swan, who can't trumpet. He can't make a noise. He has no voice. And this passage from the book takes place at the moment when his dad realizes his son, the trumpeter swan, has no voice. So dad says to the son, you apparently have a speech defect. I'm sure you will overcome it in time. There may even be some slight advantage at your age in not being able to say anything. It compels you to be a good listener. The world is full of talkers, but it's rare to find anyone who listens. And I assure you that you can pick up more information when you're listening than when you're talking. Some people, continued the father, go through life chattering and making a lot of noise with their mouth, but they never really listen to anything. They're too busy expressing their opinions, which are often unsound or based on bad information. Therefore, my son, be of good cheer, enjoy life, learn to fly, eat well, drink well, use your ears, use your eyes. I just had to share that. Last night at open mic, which was so lovely, it gave me goosebumps at the reception. One of you said, it's so great to be here, it feels like family. I think that's something all of us in this room can relate to. I remember it was probably 2 years. I lived with SD for 2 years before I met the first person I knew who also had SD. But I've since met a good chunk of people, and those people have something in common, a bunch of things in common. If someone said, tell me about people with SD, here are words I would use. Brave, determined, relentless, big-hearted, self-aware, reflective, and inspiring. And that's all of you, and everyone in this room has an amazing story to live and to tell. But the only story I can tell you is mine, so I'm going to. But it's the story, here's the theme of the story. It's the story of how spasmodic dysphonia became one of the very best things that ever happened to me. And I feel blessed to have SD. I feel grateful to have SD. And if a magic fairy flew into this room right now and said she could wind back the hands of time and take it away, I would not let her have it. Because the list of joyful things it's brought into my life is so much bigger than the pain of the neck that came with it. So the lesson for me, or the idea I'd like to think about, consider as I share my story is this. Life is in large part a soul's journey. And we are each here as humans simply to try to find our own true voice and then share it with the world. And if you stop and think about it, SD can help you do that. Because it forces us to stop, it forces us to sit still, it forces us to listen, and it forces us to look inward. So this is the story of how I came to see SD as a blessing, one of the very best things that ever happened to me. So it was the day before Halloween, October 2012, and I, a guy from the lumber business in Maine, found myself standing alone at the Wounded Knee Massacre site on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in the southwest corner of South Dakota, 2,000 miles from home. Sometime later, an old beat-up car pulled up. They would call it a res car at Pine Ridge. And a wise old jewelry maker rolled down her window, and with a warm, grand smile, she said, "What brings you here?" And I reciprocated the smile. I extended my hand. I leaned in towards her, and I said, "That is a great question." It was such a great question that it would take me 2 more years and 6 more trips to Pine Ridge before I could even start to answer it. All I knew at the time was that I was searching something universally human. I was searching for my voice, ironically, in an entire community where no one felt heard. So meanwhile, back home in Maine, I was and am the CEO of Hancock Lumber Company. Our company began doing business in 1848, before the first cannonball was fired in the Civil War. And relevant to this story, the same decade, the great Oglala war chief, Crazy Horse, was born. And I'm part of the 6th generation of my tribe, or family, or clan, to work there. And our company grows trees. We manufacture lumber that we ship all over the world, and then we retail lumber and building materials from stores in Maine and New Hampshire. And we have 475 people who are part of our team. In 2007, as you'll probably recall, the national housing and mortgage markets collapsed. And in the 3 years that followed, housing starts, the construction of new homes in Maine, fell by 66% in 36 months. And our sales fell by 50% without losing a customer. We were working with all the same customers before as after. The market was just that much smaller. In 2010, unrelated to me then, but you know it's connected now. In 2010, at the peak of the economic crisis, I began to have trouble speaking. And you know this story. So when I would go to talk, all the muscles in my throat would start to spasm and squeeze and contract, and my voice could get very broken and weak and hard to hear. And what was worse for me, particularly early on, is it felt like it took a major athletic feat to push out just a few short sentences. And talking left me dizzy, sore, out of breath, and not wanting to say very much. So I went to a doctor, and then another doctor, and then another doctor, and I finally ended up at the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Clinic in Boston, where Dr. Song gave me an exam and told me I had spasmodic dysphonia, a rare neurological disorder that I'd never heard of, that affects only speech with no known cause and no known cure. For me, there were two primary treatments. One's chemical and the other's spiritual, and I use them both, so I get periodic Botox injections. But then the other thing I've learned is the calmer I can make the inner core center of who I am, the better my voice does. And I consider myself lucky because that's a built-in barometer. I always know how I'm doing on the inside. But so there I was in 2010 trying to help lead a sixth-generation lumber company through the collapse of the housing market without the consistent or comfortable use of my voice. And I had no idea what was going to happen next. I had no strategy, no plan. It scared me. I thought it could well cost me my job. And so without a plan, my instincts took over. And I've since come to believe that when we let our instincts take over, they know the way. That's why they're called instincts. Because here's what happened, and this won't surprise you. Here's what happened at work. When you can't always talk, you listen. I got a lot better in a hurry at listening. Not because at the time it was any kind of brilliant leadership strategy. It was just a pure defense mechanism to get the conversation off me. I got good at asking questions, answering a question with a question, sharing the stage, and inviting others to lead. But picture this in a business environment. So someone would come to me, the CEO, with a question or a problem. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to give an extended answer. So they'd pose the question, and I would say, "That's a great question. What do you think?" You know where this is going. And guess what I learned when I started asking that question time and time and time again? People had great answers they already knew. So then all I needed was a follow-up statement. So they pose a question. I'd say, "That's a great question. What do you think?" They'd give their answer. And I would say, "That's a great question. That's a great idea. Let's do that." And off that person would go with his or her solution to his or her problem. And it worked great. And it aligned with something I've always believed. People are smart. Everybody's smart. Everybody cares. Everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody had great ideas. So after having managed and led that way now for 7 years, I've come to believe that maybe all organizational leaders should lose their voice for a while. So I 2012, the economy had stabilized. I had this growing feeling that I actually tried to suppress and fight, but I couldn't. I had this growing feeling that I needed to serve myself a bit more, that I needed to focus more on me, which, coming from the rugged individualism of Maine and the lumber industry, was a really awkward feeling, but I couldn't resist it. I needed time for me to find my balance, catch my breath, search for my voice. Didn't know how I was going to do that, but in August of 2012, I was at Portland Airport up in Maine with my wife, Allison, and I picked up a copy of National Geographic. And the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation was on the cover. The title read, "In the Spirit of Crazy Horse, the Rebirth of a Sioux Nation." And a young teenage Lakota boy was riding a pony bareback across a rolling hill. And I read that article, and it was as if, I can hardly describe this because I've never felt it before or since, it was as if every character, past or present, from that story came out of that yellow magazine and hugged me. And no sooner had I finished the article, this was the feature article, and I finished it before the plane took off. And I leaned over to my wife, Allison, with no more thought than this, and I said, I'm going to go there. I want to see what modern day life is like for the people that live there. And my wife, Allison, who had her own magazine going, said something at first, like, without even fully looking up, she said something like, patting me on the leg, and said, "That's good, honey, you should do that." Like I told her, I was just running out for milk, and I'd be right back. But she knew, she knew of my lifetime love affair with the American West. She knew of my lifetime love affair with American history, particularly American history during the second half of the 19th century, when our nation's western expansion and manifest destiny ran into the Plains Indians. So we got back from that trip, and I started sending emails to make a first friend at Pine Ridge. I started sending emails because my throat doesn't hurt when I email. And eventually I made a first friend who said she would host me, who is now a dear friend. And 60 days later, I was standing at the Wounded Knee Massacre site talking to an old jewelry maker. So the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is perhaps the most remote, historic, disenfranchised, and poorest of all the Sioux reservations on the Northern Plains. It sits right on top of the Nebraska Panhandle in the southwest corner of South Dakota, and it's home to the Oglala Sioux tribe. And they are the direct descendants of some of the most famous war chiefs and medicine men in American history. Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, Black Elk, and others. And I've had people there describe their community's journey through modern American history as from first to worst. Before Western expansion, they were one of the strongest, most self-sufficient tribes on the Northern Plains. And today, statistically, it is the poorest place in America. We had a national economic crisis when my voice left me in part back in 2010, when unemployment hit 9%. Today at Pine Ridge, it's somewhere between 60 and 80%. The lowest life expectancies in the Western Hemisphere are in Haiti. Second is Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Women live on average into their early 50s. Men live on average into their late 40s, right in the heart of America. And for some reason, even though I majored in history in college, I had to stand there with my own 2 feet to realize that what I learned in elementary school wasn't actually true. Columbus did not discover a new world. People already lived here. And what blew me away was that there were communities that were still trying to recover from something that happened that was set in motion over 400 years ago. And And then the more time I spent there, traveling back and forth, listening and learning, I thought I could see in the extreme example that was their story, a universal human story wanting to unfold. And that story is this. It has to do with the structure of a community before and after. Before the coming of the Wasichu, which is the Lakota term for the white men, and before the discovery of the gold in the Black Hills, which the Lakota call, I love this, their phrase for gold was the yellow metal that makes the white people crazy. And before the making and breaking of treaties or the creation of the reservation or the res, when the Lakota were free and strong and traveled where they pleased, self-sufficient, following the buffalo, if you looked at how their society was structured then, all the power and responsibility went to the individual. And the center, the corporate governing center, call it what you want, the headquarters, the main office, the man, was small, hard even to find. The great father in Washington would send negotiators out onto the plains, and they'd show up and say, "Take me to your leader." And nobody actually knew what that meant, because leadership, they didn't think, their community didn't think about leadership that way. In Lakota or Sioux society, leadership was dispersed. It was something everybody did. It was a responsibility everybody shared. But after the conquest, after the colonization, after, and I do not use this term loosely, after the genocide, and after generations of systematically trying to remake Indians as whites, and I use the term Indian because I use the terms they use. They call where they live Indian country. And just as an aside, I've never heard anyone there use the phrase Native American. They refer to themselves as Sioux or Lakota or Indian or Americans.
Wow.
But after all of that, that power that once lived with the individual had been systematically beaten down, taken away, and power then lived with the great father in Washington, thousands of miles away, and then the War Department and the Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And in that model, the community struggled. The Sioux have 7 sacred rites that were brought to them, as they tell the story, long ago, before even the coming of the horses, which came with the Spanish. And one of those rites you would have heard of is the Vision Quest. And in the Vision Quest rite, young men coming of age or adults at a transformational moment in their lives would leave the tribe and journey out into the wilderness. Think about this, us SD people, journey out into the wilderness alone to do one thing: sit still and be quiet. And the idea was that if you sat still and you were quiet, that you might gain a deeper sense of your connectivity to all living things, and you might gain or hear a bit of a whisper from the voice of your own soul. That which makes you you, that which makes you light up, lose track of time, that which makes you you. And then you were expected to come back to the tribe, share the vision you had received, and live your life in accordance with your own personal truth, your own voice. Nobody's voice but yours. And that idea to me was just elegantly powerful in its simplicity. If every member of the tribe was searching for and speaking with their own true voice, then the tribe would be strong. It was right out of Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book to me. The strength of the pack is the wolf. So somewhere along the way of traveling back and forth from Maine to Pine Ridge, it took longer than it should have for me to figure this out, and I realized I was having my own modern-day vision quest experience. And one day, a Sunday morning, alone in the Black Hills in Wind Cave National Park, with the far away from the road, with the golden grass, the blowing wind, and the buffalo, that vision came to me. And it was simple again. Here was the vision. The partial loss of my voice, which I'd only ever prior to thought of as a problem, a hindrance, a liability, or a disability, was actually a blessing and a calling and an opportunity to do two things. First, in a busy world of bigger, better, more, go, 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 where we all have a list of roles we're expected to play, it was an opportunity for me to break for a minute from those roles and sit still and look inward and think about the essence of who I was. And then second, back in my roles, it was an opportunity to do what I could to help strengthen the voices of others, especially those who didn't feel heard. So then it was time for what the great American mythologist Joseph Campbell called the return. It was time for me to go home and try to integrate what I'd learned, and I chose to do that in three ways. First, for the people of Pine Ridge, I made a commitment to stay connected and to do what I could to help support the resurrection of a once powerful voice. So I started a small nonprofit. I wrote a book to share my experiences with them and to talk about them. But mostly I just made a commitment to keep going back. People ask me what I do there, and that question used to stump me. Because I thought I'd have to come up with something dramatic and important. But I finally just came clean. I said, well, I don't actually really do anything there. I just hang out with people there. But I've since come to think about the power and the beauty of that. With no role, no responsibility, no title, no reason, no purpose to care for them or to solve anything for them, just to be with them and among them. And I've since come to believe that awareness in and of itself, awareness and connectivity is a really powerful act. And at Hancock Lumber, the opportunity seemed really simple and exciting. What if we could create an organization where everybody led, where every voice, this is easier said than done, but this is the path we try to walk, where every voice felt respected, trusted, empowered, important, and heard. That was the calling of SD for me within my role. Wouldn't an organization where everybody led outperform an old-fashioned model where just a few people held all the cards? So we went about, for like 6 years now, we've been systematically trying to figure out how to push power out from the center, how to get the center to do less, not more, and how to make the voice of the employee stronger, louder, and more important. Third-party surveys, focus groups, huddles, sharing information, and more. Systematic, deliberate, push power out. And it may well be a coincidence, but I know it's not. In the years that followed, our company started putting up records in pretty much every category we measure. And more importantly to me, what I really care about is we've now 3 years in a row been selected as the best place to work in Maine, which is a really difficult thing to achieve. And then the last promise I made to integrate what I learned was to continue to take time to sit still and to listen to the whispers of my own soul, which was the gift that SD gave me, and to not squander that gift. Because I'd already seen by then, in a counterintuitive way, that the more I served myself, the more valuable I was actually becoming to others, and that in the weirdest way, done right, being selfish and selfless. Because we're all here to try to find and chase that which makes us light up and lose track of time. And when we do that, whatever that is, whatever that voice is for you, that's when we are our gift back to the world. So I love sharing this story, but I've never shared it with a group that matters to me more than this one, because you know, because you're there, you've lived it. But I say to people, you know, there's nothing special about it took something significant. I'm a slow learner, so it took SD to learn these lessons, but I say to people, you don't need to acquire a rare neurological voice disorder to learn to stop, sit still, and listen for the whispers of your own soul. And you don't need to be the CEO of some multi-generational company to find cool ways every day to make other people feel more heard. And you don't even need anyone else to go first, because as the Sioux knew long ago in their indigenous wisdom, that tribes are made strong, one individual at a time. So that's my story, and it blesses my heart to be able to share it with you. Thank you. Can I do a short reading? So there's no hotels on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. There's one motel, but I stay in the guest room upstairs at the Singing Horse Trading Post, north of Anderson, right in the heart of the reservation. And homes there are very collaborative affairs. You don't have to be related to be living in someone's home. People come and go, and they kind of just take care of each other. So one of my best friends in life was a woman who was living in a trailer out back at the time. Her name is Catherine Grayday, and she's a Dakota elder from the Standing Rock Reservation, where the whole oil pipeline thing played out. Well, we were sitting there one night at dinner. This is where this scene takes place, in the Singing Horse Trading Post. There are like 5 or 6 of us. Catherine continues speaking, and in doing so references the phrase internalized oppression. What do you mean by internalized oppression, Catherine, I ask? It's just about being worn down, generation after generation, the cavalry, the missionaries, the government, the boarding schools. You wake up one day and it's all been internalized. When you've been oppressed over generations and generations, it finally takes hold. The oppression takes hold within you. Once it takes hold within you, it's perpetuated from within, and we act the oppression out on ourselves. We perpetuate the oppression on ourselves. This is how deeply it's been ingrained. Silence comes over the table. We're all waiting for Catherine to speak again, and after some time she does. There's a lot of jealousy here, lots of infighting, lots of distrust. Who's more pure-blooded? I think people waste lots of energy on meaningless questions such as this. If we're all related, why does it matter who's more pure-blooded? More time passes. Change comes from within, Catherine continues. Our progress as a people must come from within. I like Pine Ridge, though, Catherine says. It's one of the least colonized places in America. That's what I like about living here. The conversation bounces around. Dinner is always an event here. We've been at the table for well over an hour, and no one's in any hurry to see it end. I'm always so tired here at night, I said, shaking my head and yawning. It's the energy here, Catherine replies. The energy here is different than what you're used to. It's more powerful. Silence follows before Catherine looks right at me and speaks. You were searching for your inner self. That's why you came here. You were looking for something within you, and you've been able to find it here. Your spirit guides have spoken to you, and you have listened. I have many spirit guides, Catherine continues nonchalantly. There are those I know and some I don't know. I give the ones I know names. I talk to them. Some people think I'm crazy because I talk to them, but that doesn't bother me. They're with me all the time. They're my friends. As dinner winds down, the conversation turns light. Do you know what the Lakota word for vegetarian is? Catherine asks. No, what's the Lakota word for vegetarian? I say, playing along. Lousy hunter, she answers. three ideas, and then I'd love to listen to you, or we could talk for what time we have left. Just three ideas to share. And one of the things that's happened to me is ideas. Well, my favorite thing to share is a hug. I don't need to know someone very long before I'll hug them. My favorite thing to share is a smile. And I don't need to know someone at all to share a smile. But my other favorite thing to share is an idea. And it's been really liberating to come to think about ideas as not something anyone else has to take. It doesn't ever have to be anyone else's truth. And when you don't have to sell your idea, you're free to just share it, and people are free to think about it. But three ideas from this story for me, thinking about us as an SD family together. One is leadership. I've seen this here and how this organization runs. I saw this quote the other day from Lao Tzu, so this must be a really, really old quote, who once said, "When the best leader's work is done, the people say we did it ourselves." Second thing today has me thinking about, this is a fun idea, I think, to just play along, just like to pretend it's true. It might not be true, we'll never know if it is true, but what if you pretended that the following was true? What if SD picked you for a reason? And I think it's really healthy. You'll never know. I'll never know. The great doctors that were here, they'll never know. But it is the coolest idea to just noodle on and pretend. What if it picked you for a reason? Or to go back to the old jewelry maker, what brings you here? Because it changed my life. A CEO, I was like, well, what good is a CEO who can't talk very much? And for me, it was a much better CEO. But more importantly than that, for me, it was releasing parts of who I was that never, ever would have come out. Without SD, I never, ever would have known, I don't think. I would have lived and died in this body without ever knowing that there was a big part of me that was a storyteller, that was a writer, that was a photographer, and that was an activist. And I never, ever would have had that part of my life, I don't think, if SD hadn't caused me to stop, slow down, sit still, and think. And then finally, the last idea I wanted to share, and I think medically I would be refuted, but I don't care. It's just what I believe. And I guess I mean this on a literal and spiritual level. I know this is true. Our true voice still lives within us. Literally and spiritually. And you get glimpses of it. I don't know if you noticed this, but last night at the Share the Mic, do you ever notice the moments, like you probably noticed it with me, where someone with SD will be somewhat struggling along, and then suddenly, for no reason, will hit a normal stride. And it's just a snippet of that old voice. It's still there. For me, I don't know if anyone else has this. Every morning when I wake up, my voice resets. My voice is like fresh. It's still there. And so I don't know that we can be cured. I hope not, because I don't want to be cured. Because it's been so good today. But I do know we can get better. And that SD can make us better in ways that are so rich that it couldn't possibly have happened without it. So that's why SD to me, despite the pain in the neck, is a blessing. So, just wanted to